Good evening, everyone. This is Indvini Joel, your host for the day. We have with us a formal person, not a formal, but a great friend of mine, Mr. Edwin Vimal, Director HR from Sylvan Technologies. Before we go into his introductions and detailing, a few thought for everyone. This is episode 18 from Sapient HR's Leadership Lens Beyond Titles. Leadership Lens is a podcast series facilitated over across every Thursday between 7 to 8, and we call upon various leaders across from various journeys across who have transformed their life and impacted many more people. So what we look from this conversation is a heart to heart conversation and looking at empowering the next generation of HRs across, because we believe transformation is not supposed to halt at one place, but we get empowered by empowering others. So with that motto and with the HR's role getting changed over the generations, we are also looking at not only being a cost center or a human development center, but from there we are also looking at being empathetic and looking at employee experience and also looking at employee relations. So we have Mr. Edwin over here who will be facilitating this discussion, and the topic for today, the conversation will highlight from uh, employee experience to employee excellence. We have a glitch over here with regard to the video being to be played for Edwin. We are very sorry for that. But if you can share some insights about your introduction before he introduces himself, I'll have some details about his journey, so that he can add up if I had missed out something for him across.
Thanks, Inman.
So he comes with more than 14 years of experience into the HR space, and he's not a traditional HR. He has lived the journey across with detailing across, and he comes from a background of changing people, transforms from begins from his own self. So he has worked not only as a people experience facilitator or a transformer, but he also plays multiple hats in the organization and also works as a product manager for HR transformation. Rather than me hyping about our guest of honor for the day, I would request Edwin to share few glimpses about his journey and his transformation, which is always better to hear the story from the person himself, because he would be the right person to tell the story.
Thanks, Inman. I love to share that. So, first of all, thank you for you and Arun for giving this opportunity. Right. So, to start with, where I would start is I would start with my education. So, technically, I started my BSc Physics as my undergraduation, but during that time only, I sincerely realized that my interest was not more into the particle side. So, my interest was more into the people perspective. So, that realization basically kind of helped me to kind of pursue the MBA and then technically in Chennai. And then from there, basically, I got the exposure to work in different companies, Reliance Communications, Kotari Industrial Corporations, and Classic Polo. It's a manufacturing company. And then the long-term home, which I'm currently working, Syswine Technologies. So I know many people basically do this mispronunciation, but it's systems and wine. So Syswine. So wine basically represents the vineyard, the growth perspective. So we have come up with the word of Syswine. And here I started as assistant HR, and now I'm basically kind of being a board of director as well as a director of HR. And this company has given me a profound challenge as well as exposure also. And through that, basically, kind of, I grown up a lot, I would say. And I had a great opportunity to work with a lot of C-suite executives and leadership teams, and from different areas, starting from the talent acquisition to the workforce planning, compensation design, organization development, and my favorite part of change management part, which we are discussing today, right? So how it plays a vital part in this employee engagement and employee experience and employee excellence part. So I always believe that people are core of everything, and I always had to trust the people in the process, right? So nobody can remove that element. That I always will trust it. So people with the product, right? That is the critical part, and that is what I believe that will makes an entire organization successful. How we keep on adapting to these two situations. And I think that's kind of a quite brief introduction which I like to share, and I can move into the topic if you are okay.
Thanks, Edwin, for that insights about your journey of transformation. And for anything to happen in the future, we need to understand what steps we take today, and that's what is about transformation. And you rightly said about understanding our own realm and being self-aware to look at where we want to go ahead. So I think from your journey, I could take it like if a frog jumps forward, before it jumps forward, it takes few steps backward. Or you take a leopard for a discussion before it goes for a hunting, it just goes behind and comes. That's the impact of the journey. So congratulations on taking the right steps and looking at a transformative journey at the organization. So moving ahead, so we our topic for today's discussion is about employee experience. So I think it is also overly used between across different means. So how do you want to reinforce the understanding or the difference between employee satisfaction, employee
Mm.
engagement, employee experience, or employee excellence? How do you want to take it up?
Okay. Before basically kind of getting into the point, I like to first give a crisp definition for each thing, because from the definition which I'm telling, right, you can understand the whole contrast is there. For an example, employee satisfaction, right? We always tell, am I happy with what I get, right? Like the employee satisfaction always measured towards pay, perks, work-life balance, and it's more like a transactional perspective. It's kind of a backward-looking way, right? Measures how someone feels today about the past conditions. Whereas employee engagement, basically, am I willing to give discretionary effort, like emotional and the motivational commitment towards the outcome? It is more like a present tense. It is about the energy and the intent, basically, it is bringing. Then the employee experience, basically, it is like making the employees to feel what it is actually like to work here from an end to end. End to end means from onboarding to exit, the full journey, right? So within that, there are a lot of attributes: hiring, growth, tools, cultures, exits. So it is basically a design layer that beneath the satisfaction and the engagement perspective. And employee excellence, am I becoming the best version of professional self? And is that converting into the organizational value? Like it is basically the outcome, the impact, and the multiplier effect. I don't think we cannot tell that it's just a feeling part. For an example, I would like to give some analogy also. Imagine satisfaction is like a weather, and engagement is kind of a mood, and the experience is like kind of an environment. And excellence is something which the companies and the employees also can harvest on it. I like to give them one good example where you can correlate very easily. So let's take when employees are being onboarded, right, to the companies, right. So basically, some companies just give laptops, some companies do desktop. I think these days nobody is giving desktop, but at least they give laptops. And then some companies basically kind of monitors, right. So I like to correlate that example with this. In our company, so we give both laptop as well as monitor. But I will tell this: when giving an average laptop, it may satisfy the employee as well as the company in a kind of decent time. But a good laptop is the kind of an employee engagement factor. Along with the good laptop, if you are giving a 13-inch monitor, may kind of correlate to an employee experience factor. But if you give a 22-inch monitor with the best thing, right? So it basically helps them on the employee excellence. Many people think using a monitor, right? Nothing else it's bringing. No, it brings a lot of productivity, right? You need not to switch if you're basically designing something, right? So you need not to worry about that doing things on a simple monitor and then switching towards different tabs. You can have multiple tabs and all the things. So I believe that brings that employee experience part. And luckily, we had a kind of YCO that who used to keep pushing us that we need monitors, definitely big monitors for each of you if you really want your productivity to go high. And that is really true. I don't know how many of you basically kind of agree to this fact, but I really felt that fact in our organizations, and that really helped us to boost the productivity in a big time. So it basically helped the employees also to stay very productive and helps them to minimize the errors and all the factors.
Simple things make a lot of difference, and that's what
True.
simplicity is sometimes being taken for granted.
Yes.
And over a period of your journey across in the HR leadership role, when did you feel like or believe like employee experience is that only alone is not longer enough, or what's your perspectives on that?
See, before even getting into the employee experience, I believe still many companies are still stuck in the employee satisfaction mode or employee engagement mode, right? It even took me kind of to realize, maybe I would say before COVID, right? We would stuck in the kind of employee experience factor, not on the employee excellence factor, because we kind of see the organizations, right? Always measuring by the EX scores. I would like to shortly call that as employee experience scores, right? Like good onboarding, good facilities, and fair pay that still had a flat performance and a mediocre bench strength, right? That is what I think still many companies are focusing. But employee experience is all about like how people feel about the work, but it doesn't automatically improve how good people get at work. For an example, companies always look for talents who are readily available. They don't invest in trying to kind of look for a potential person who can get job done. And I think that is where the real success of employee excellence lies. I don't think many companies are still doing it. They always try to solve that temporary situation. Like for an example, in software terms, if you need a kind of a Java person, so they just I look for only Java person. Or if you need kind of a full stack person, they always look for Java with Angular. They don't look for a person who is very good in Java, who is ready to learn Java, who was launching for an opportunity to work in Java. They don't do that, right? So, in my opinion, a great employee experience, right? So, without a growth architecture, may kind of just produce a comfortable plateaus. You realize that you are optimizing for a retention of comfort and not retention for capability. Every organization should start to look for the capability mode, not for the retention mode. So, if they start to do that, I believe like me, right? They will believe EX alone is not enough. So that is the point I would say. Like I may come to a realization, EX alone is not enough. That may not help us to kind of survive, especially in this post AI world, right? AI can do all the programming languages, but we need somebody who understand how AI works, right? How to look errors within the AI programming. The critical thinking skills is the critical part.
No, taking from that insight of the shift between employee satisfaction and employee engagement, and then to the experience part, I think a lot of organization would have invested heavily on engagement activities across, but still we find the attrition to be high, or the employees keep on leaving across. So, what do you think the employee should do, or the organization should look at?
Uh, the organization basically look beyond the survey programs. For an example, these days, right, everything basically have pulse surveys. They used to call the nice terms, right? But the survey basically capture only the sentiment at a point of time. They are lagging or a self-reported signal. But the organizations should start measuring the real measurement, combining both the sentimental as well as the behavioral and the business data. For an example, the behavioral signal, right? It's basically kind of talks about the internal mobility ranges and how the relationship between the manager and the employee, and how much time we are giving for the new hires to stay productive, and then how much the amount of voluntary attrition has been reduced, right? So I would say they have to start looking from that perspective. And growth signals also, like how many percentage of roles has been filled internally rather than looking for the outside. And then the skill velocity. So how fast capability is being built within the company, and then the promotion readiness within the pipeline depth. So I would say if they basically kind of feel from the survey mode, they can only manage the feelings part. So they need to start measure the system that produce the feelings. That is what the organization should start doing.
I think you also touched upon the HR transformation journey across. From a personal perspective, we have come into a phase where we are looking at giving the best experience for every stakeholder. So I think that's a great way to connect the interlock. And can you put up out like what misconceptions does leaders will have about employee experience? Because when you're looking at leaders at the senior C-suite and everything, we will have a millennial or a baby boomer sitting over there when you look at the workforce gamut of people. So how do you rate the employee experience across? Because I think I connected to the basic needs, the Maslow's theory of needs, and how do you look into those conceptualization?
See, that's a good question. The reason is since I'm a HR, right? So I always get this thought process. Maybe I hear from fellow HRs also. The majority feels employee experience, right? They always feel it's a HR owned program. But to be honest, it's a kind of a leadership outcome based, right? So HR basically kind of all they can do is they can bring the good talent within the company, right? So they cannot think HR runs enough initiatives and the experience will kind of boost it. I don't think so in that way because 70 percentage of somebody's experience is shaped by the direct manager and the nature of work. It is not by the HR programming. And HR can help us in architecting the systems, as I said, but they cannot single-handedly deliver the experience. For an example, in our organization, when we kind of doing such things, right? So we give the necessary tools needed for the managers, how we can build the employee excellence for the team members, how to basically kind of reduce the mundane jobs which we are doing through automation part, and how to basically build the real accountability, how to reduce the frictions which we are having between the employees and the managers, how we are tracking the honest feedbacks and how the challenging assessments are being provided to the employees over the period of time. That is the critical part which basically kind of they all have to think. But these misconceptions, if they basically fix it, I believe the employee excellence will kind of happen on its own.
I'll
Because
take a question from over here from the discussion. I think you pinpointed that every experience has to be driven from top down and across all the hierarchies. So, HR, as you said, the HR can only facilitate this kind of an experience across. So, who is responsible for employee experience? The managers or the leadership team?
it's not kind of one size fits for all kind of a thing. I would say each one has the player kind of playing the role. For an example, I already told, right? HR has a job of bringing the right talent, and HR is the kind of critical layer, like kind of imagine a sandwich, right? Connects the people as well as the organization. So they have to be kind of brutal in terms of telling the feedback. If somebody is kind of some system is not working out, they instead of pleasing the managers or the management, right, they have to tell there is a problem in that process and they have to fix it. I think so. HR plays in that that way, and the managers, right, they plays a very critical part in closing the performance gap. I would call that as a coaching gaps because they are the critical person in order to coach somebody. They cannot expect kind of a ready-made people from the market. They have to invest time and they really have to kind of find the potential within the person and how to basically kind of make it successful for the organization. That is where I think the real kind of challenge is coming for them. And of course, the clarity of expectation also have to be very clear from the organization because without giving a clarity, right, what an employee is going to do, I don't think they can do it. And employees also playing their part because it is like kind of stretching their muscles, right? It's not a micro stretch. It should be kind of happen in a micro stretch. It may not happen in a mega stretch. For an example, if there is an average performer, right? So you need to kind of instead of giving a comfortable assignments, you need to kind of start giving fast feedback loops and as well as slowly kind of challenge them through the big assignments. In that way, I believe we can able to kind of create the ecosystem of employee excellence part. And HR role where it is playing is it basically shifts from the talent identification to the capability engineering mode. Because these days, talent identification once it is happened, right, the capability engineering mode is also plays a critical part. And that is where we even built a system. I think post COVID, we never thought we are going to build a system where it is going to really help the employees to measure their own capability and then kind of they coming up voluntarily and telling us so what are the skills which I really kind of want to improve in this quarter and how a manager can really support them through the on the job training facilities, right? So If we are able to build such an environment, I think it will do it. So to conclude, it is all the people plays their role. Like HR has to play their part, managers has to play their part, and people, right? So whoever really wants to grow, they have to play their part. If you notice in bigger companies, a person who started as an engineer, okay, even after 5 years, his pay never go high. But the same within the same company, if you notice, there was another engineer. Basically, their pay will be different. So that will definitely create a curiosity what is happening. So if you notice within these three layers, right, somebody could have failed. One either maybe manager maybe failed, or maybe the employee, right, who basically getting the signal from the manager, hey, you need to kind of learn the skills if you really want to stay top. Somebody could have failed. So if these three layers are kind of getting in align, I think the success will be for sure.
I think you are taking it across step by step across to the journey of like the transformation. I could connect it to the journey of a butterfly. We are there as a worm, then there's a cocoon mode, and in cocoon mode we are not supposed to disturb. We are looking at self awareness, self transformation, upskilling everything, and then the outcome is the butterfly. What
True.
people don't see is the hardship which the butterfly goes through in the transformation. And we as leaders are not supposed to put our hands on that transformation because it deviates the process of transformation. And from that perspective across, I would like to take the question from building excellence. I think you did put a lot of point on the transformation from satisfaction to experience to excellence. So we are looking at people who are already as performers. They might be as an individual performer or as a capabilities as a team performer. But how do we look at that rooting into an organization multiplier or organization transformation?
So I would say it's basically kind of continuous learning mechanism that basically helps to keep the competence from decaying into the obsolescence part. Because if you basically kind of want to do it in the set way which you are telling, right? So competency is basically knowing how to do the job as it is exists today. But excellence is something which requires continuously updating the knowledge as the job, even the environment is getting changed. So best organizations treat learning as embedded in the workflow part, like real projects. As I said, the real stretch, right? So the micro and macro stretches, and starting to give the real feedback rather than they are considering the event as kind of a part of a training calendar activity. If they do that, I believe the excellence kind of can be built.
From this excellence I want to take, there are organizations who plan for succession planning and the leadership changeover and shift across. So how do you put that into practice?
See, you need to give the benchmarks. When you basically hire the talents, right? So you basically look through the lens of potential. Is there any really a desperation to grow, right? You can definitely measure, and that is where HRs, right, cannot be replaced by the automation, the AI part. So even though AI can help us in the pre-screening process and everything, that one-on-one conversation, right, with the human, right? So we can only look through the eyes whether they are really kind of desperate to grow. When I basically kind of joined this organization, I think my boss seen that desperation, and that is why he was able to kind of challenge me with all those assignments. And whenever he gives me the signal part, right, through these challenges, right, I taken that in a positive note. And that HR going through that screening part, right, still that plays a very vital role. And once they come into the organization, right, the HR has to kind of have the criteria very clearly where they are basically kind of doing the succession planning. And many companies, I think the HR plays that role very well. Maybe many companies, they may just see that as a hiring bodies. And that is where things are basically kind of starting to kind of rock the foundations. So to kind of tell the practical way, you have to hire for the trajectory and not just the current skills. Even kind of average people, if I believe that through the constant coaching, they can stay very successful. And we have a lot of great examples here where people were looking up to the right feedback, because in many cases I think the right feedback was not given to the employees. They know, like for an example, when somebody is getting laid off, right, so they are not getting the proper signal from their managers So you are basically in the kind of borderline, right? And I don't think the company is also kind of laying off all the star employees. They never laid off the star employees. So they always kind of see, of course, cost lens is always plays its part, but along with the cost, value also plays its part. So many organizations still afford to keep them despite the cost because the value which they are adding, right, that always adds a significant difference.
No, I think you transcend from the hierarchy. The next level of generation needs to look at in the system, in the business environment. How do they look at succession planning? And you also brought in the perspective of how performer who is like an average performer, how we can look at transforming his journey as well, because the scale at which the business is transforming at the moment, it's not a few years down the line, it's like impact is very huge. And I think we can take our own personal examples across, like our parents would have stayed in an organization. Like, for the best example I can give is, my dad worked with an government agency, and he was there with the institution for around 32 years of continuous service.
True.
And now we come from a generation where we have shifted across to different organizations because our aspirations have grown in. And what I liked from your our conversation over here is about everyone has a value, and how do we gauge that value. And I'll take it very simple way of putting it across can be like, carbon is same, your graphite is also carbon, your diamond is also carbon, but the value of each of them is very different, and the organization has to vet in what should be the value proposition across. So that's a
Exactly.
very
They cannot fear about cutting things, right? When, as you said rightly, that the carbon graphite example, definitely it goes through the pressure, it goes through the pressure. But that helps you to understand really, right, which is the good material which can withstand the pressure. And when it withstands the pressure, right, I think it's shining on its own as a diamond. So that is true.
I think you also brought in some perspective to the next question from our previous discussions. So, should we look at internal mobilities, or are we looking, or I can put it like, should we look at getting a resource from externally into the organization, or are we look at upskilling the current employees in the organization?
It goes hand in hand, I would say. Many companies basically kind of do it depends on their business needs. For an example, if it is a product company, the product companies always kind of look from the cost perspective because they have to basically keep the production cost minimal, and they hire talents and they kind of train them from the scratch. You can see a lot of good examples in India, right? But if you see the other side, the software service companies, right? So they basically need some kind of people who can fulfill the role right away. So the need versus the velocity, right? That plays a very critical part in filling this kind of talents where and upskilling them and succession planning and filling them ready-made aspects, I would say. For an example, in the software service, as I already told, right? So even we do both software service as well as products. But the product companies where we are basically investing and we can basically even bear up, it takes time for the people to build the necessary product skills. And unfortunately, the Indian market is kind of more oriented toward this body shopping things. They never kind of made us to kind of think from the product engineering perspective, right? And slowly it is changing. Is it changing? I think these days it's changing a lot. I can see a lot of product companies are kind of showing up, and we are also getting into the race of product engineering side. And I think more has to come, but that product engineering skills needs kind of design thinking skills also. So people have to kind of think from the design perspective because no longer we need coders, right? They can do the coding. So the design thinking is the critical part. So to answer your question, we need both the types, and the business needs and the circumstances, situations, right? Basically, it defines what kind of people at what kind of role basically it is needed.
I think you rightly touched upon the balance. Like the HR plays a very vital balance between employees and employers. So the capabilities of bringing in a fresh talent or upgrading the skills in the current employees in the organization is also very critical. So I think you brought in the perspective of being living in those moments. At the moment, what is required for the business, let's do it that. But also you brought in the perspective of future ready. I think now we are also looking at the concept of like forward engineering. There are a lot of
So
organizations which are looking at getting people as a forward engineer, and then it's a huge demand for people in that landscape. And another thing I liked from our conversation is we as Indians, the software development industry in India has been more predominantly into the service mindset, which you
true.
rightly brought in. And when you're shifting and you are developing a product line, you need to have the product mindset, the project management and the product mindset. But the transition of people, because they have worked in a service part, the shift has not happened.
Very true. Very true. When we interview people, right, that is a realistic problem we are seeing. So they never think with this critical thinking and the judgment decisions, right? Making decisions on the design level and architecture level. I don't think we are seeing a handful amount of people only have holds that capability to do things. And of course, they are also mostly kind of sucked up by the product engineering companies. So that is a very kind of vital skills, which I believe if any engineers are attending the session, right, they have to take that as a tip. So they have to focus more from the design thinking perspective rather than the pure programming perspective. So I can see kind of a lot of engineers who kind of stuck to the old technology now understand, oh my god, AI is going to take my job. I definitely have to shift my learning path. And they are all kind of sitting and listening, and they are trying to change themselves kind of in the learning landscape.
No, and you rightly put about, see, upskilling has to happen across. And when we are in the comfort zone, it always leaps us back into the threshold of not going to the transformation journey. And you rightly said, the interviewer, we as HR need to have the capabilities to differentiate between the mindset of the people and their aspirations. And how do you think we should judge a person? Because we have a lot of AI systems as well. We have the JDs being written by the AI systems. We have the resumes also being built by another AI system. How are we facilitating these discussions or conversations where there is a lot of artificial intelligence? How do you think the recruiter or the people experience team to look at the right resources for an organization? Because at this landscape, the right resource and the right experience is very critical.
Correct. See, as I told already, the transactional layer of HR, right, which is scheduling and then basically kind of screening part and then making reports and helping is on the pre-screening. I think all those things can be done by AI because that doesn't need kind of manual way of doing things. But where it needs the human interaction is, right, we need to know really they are kind of good fit for the culture. So they have to basically look from the perspective of culture fit questions. Like the HR has to know about the culture. Definitely, when I see majority HRs are being in their organization for amicable period of years, and they really know how the culture is and how their structure is and everything. So in that perspective, so they can always see that whether they are fit for the culture. Skills is kind of we can teach. That is what AI is telling us now, right? You need the people with the right mindset and who is kind of ready to take the baton and ready to move along with you. That is the kind of a people we need. So that basically kind of you need to have to throw some behavioral questions for sure. But the behavioral question means not kind of very deep psychological questions. You need to kind of walk through them in the day-to-day life, how they are dealing things and how they basically kind of holding certain things, they achieved certain things, or when they failed it, how they see the failure and how they are learning from the failure. So through those things, I believe we can get the realistic answers. Because this AI, right, this helping us to do manage the interviews also. All the technical questions, right, these days I'm seeing people are answering and getting 100%. But when it is happening in person, right, I don't think the same results are happening.
I
So
think so. You're saying we need to call the people across at the organizations and do. I think
true, one
um,
round, at least a discussion, one discussion, I believe it has to happen in person. I don't think they cannot skip that because they have to come see the office, get a feel around the office. I would even say go one level, arrange a kind of a meeting with their existing engineers. We do that in our organization. We do that. We call that as a big picture meeting. Through the big picture meeting, right, we bring three flavors. The three flavors are one who is with the organization for a long time, staying successful. and one who joined maybe in the medieval time, 3 to 4 years time, and one who joined in less than a year. And HR never interferes in these conversations. We basically allocate a conference room and they have a coffee with the cup strategy. They discuss freely on the learn, except the salary part. They discuss free. They discuss freely on the learning curve and the process things and how a company is really flexible on the business process improvements, how they are really helping you on the personal well-being part. Everything basically kind of we kind of allow them to discuss, and that really changed the way of dropouts in the office.
And
So
absolutely, I think you're giving a first glimpse of how your future would like in the organization and what kind of team are you looking at. And I think a lot of discussions does happen over a coffee rather than
true.
on the boardrooms.
Exactly, and it's not a more formal also, right? So they are a little bit relaxed, and they are going to share the true experience. So there are no predefined questions. They don't know what question they are going to ask. So it can be kind of from A to Z. So that gives a lot of confidence to the new employees. Okay, we are entering into the zone where it's kind of definitely going to help us in a big terms. And of course, they are seeing the office that helps them to find and understand even the structures, right? How we basically kind of we are building the structure, and that is what I told, right? So I don't know how many organizations provide you with a laptop with a very big monitors, and we basically provide it, and that really kind of I can see that when they're amazed when they're coming to the office. Oh, okay, you guys have these many facilities. That really makes a difference when they're coming and visiting the office in person. And that I would recommend that every HR should have at least one discussion. You can afford the expenses even if they're traveling from other state, right? You just tell them, yeah, we can afford the expenses, but we definitely need you in person. You come and just get a feel around the office, have a talk with the humans who are working in this office for an amicable period of time, and then you make a decision.
I think you
So
rightly put it across in the way. I think a lot of tech companies believe in this concept, the human in loop.
true.
You rightly talked about the looping system and mechanism, because we are having a lot of systems which are automated, and how we are keeping the human empathy and ensuring compliance. And I think that's what during the COVID period brought in the proctoring system into place. And I think we had a lot of offers being given during the COVID period, and there was a lot of failures also, because when you look at the person coming into the office, there was a lot of changeovers. So taking the negative side aside, now with AI building in, two questions, two parts to the question: how is AI changing the employee experience? And when now, as we have AI in place in the ecosystem, what would be the role of an HR over here?
Uh, I would say it's a gray area still because after the AI came, right, I think we were not able to save all the positions. For an example, designers, right? I don't think we no longer need a specific poster for a designer. Even HR can pitch in with the support of AI tools, right? They need to nicely give the requirements and they can basically make a nice design. Of course, it may not be perfect as much as creative, but still the message which they want to convey it, I think it can be reached quickly. So what basically kind of HRs have to do is they basically kind of keep kind of thinking how to automate the AI using the AI, right? What are the mundane process, whatever they are doing, they have to automate it. For an example, we basically automated the payroll system. I would say literally kind of 8 to 10 years back, and we basically kind of no longer make the HRs to do the any payroll stuffs. I mean, maybe 2018, right? I would say that we basically kind of do this manual way of checking in time, out time, how many seconds, and then we need to allocate permissions and everything.
I think there are a lot of MSMEs and SMEs who are still following that gamut of doing the
Exactly.
manual check. Yes.
We are ready to help. We developed the system long back. It's a very custom made design. So that we build help the HR, right, to save the time, and that help the HR to focus on the strategic perspectives rather than thinking over this transactional perspective, the administration perspectives. And the another thing is, right, change requests, because an organization with the amicable size, there will be a lot of change will happen. For an example, employee basically kind of moving to another department, or when employee basically kind of have a new kind of details to be added on the personal level, they basically kind of have to do it. And earlier times and all, right, we need an email or we need a form, a Google form or a Microsoft form to fill the details and basically put it everything. But no longer, I think we may kind of need such paperwork. So we developed a system. That system basically kind of help the employees to request whatever the information they want to change it. They do the change, and line manager directly reviews and approve it. We literally kind of killed the paperwork in between the system, and that is saving a lot of time also for sure. And I think still many organizations, right, the change management is a very critical need, which they basically still doing it in this paperwork way. And I worked in the manufacturing domain also, and I know how a change,
Pain.
right, happens in a very slow way, right? It takes weeks, it
Absolutely.
takes months to approve something. And here, right, within a fraction of a second, when an employee basically kind of changing from one department to another department, do things quickly. And it affects in all the related kind of modules and whatever the things which are, for an example, reimbursements, do it. So the other part, skill areas, everything, even position replacements, right? We are basically doing it in a very quick way. We don't make the employee to wait, take an interview, and then only we do changes everything. No, we even developed a great system for that also. So I think the HR's role is now completely shifting from the transactional to the system design level thinking and process simplification level. These are the core areas that HR, I think, in the future going to focus. And I feel bad because it is going to basically kind of it is going to cut the jobs eventually, but we cannot basically avoid it. The reason is I believe we all remember when our fathers and all working in the companies, right, manufacturing companies, we had a system called time card punch, right? And I think that is where eventually the HR was born. The HR was born through that
Absolutely.
process only. And earlier we called that as admin only. So we never had a HR concept. And now we don't even basically look into that. We have a mission that basically kind of reads every employee's in and out time. We are getting a report, and then through the report we are making a decision. And the same way when Tally came, right, finance were on finance departments,
Finance
accounts
people are
departments were
very
basically on a literally fear, right? Oh my God, our jobs are going to be lost. No, I don't think you're going to be kind of lose the job. You need to kind of learn how to kind of embrace the systems in order to kind of get adapted yourself to the part. And whoever is not adapting, of course, they are dancing to the music for sure. They basically kind of seeing the way out from that organization or from the industry itself. So AI HR cannot basically remove from their career plot. They have to kind of keep learning, and they have to think from the role of not as a process administrator. They have to think from the perspective of architect of human systems, designing how people, culture, and technology basically interact and how it is impacting the organization. They have to start seeing from that perspective. That is more vital in the coming days.
I think you brought in the criticality of there's a very thin line between people, process, purpose, and also bringing in the culture and the technological advancements happening. So, from the four P's across to empathy and control and clarity, that's also what you can bring in. And I think earlier we had a personal department, and then the shift has happened over. So, that's rightly being put about. The thing. And I think you also talked about the tally part. I think now we don't have any accounts person who doesn't know tally, and without tally I think their life becomes a hell kind of a thing,
True,
because
true.
no works happens across. That's the
Happens that way.
transformation. And I think that was the same thing being brought about when the computer had come in and excels have been brought about. The account systems were like, why do I need an excel system?
Exactly.
And then now you don't have an accounts person without an excel.
True, true. The same way the AI also, they will learn eventually, but it's a change man. That is a great example for a change management. And that change management definitely put you into a pressure that will definitely stretch your muscles, the brain muscles to learn things. If you learn, definitely kind of you can survive for another 10 years. I won't say you can be stay successful forever. The next 10 years we can definitely say we don't know after 10 years, right, what is going to come new.
At the level of technological advancements with quantum computing
Completely.
and blockchain, and across with the semiconductor industry looking at transformation, I think you rightly put 10 years is a long time to go. And I think you also brought in the perspective of the transformation you said, and there's a very thin line across in that, rightly being put across. And so, how do organization in this transformation across with the change and everything? can embrace empathy or humanity in the processes or in the plethora of things happening across?
Uh, I would basically kind of tell those two items as a, I can define both items as a part of a culture, because culture is basically kind of not just coming through the paperworks. It is basically kind of coming through what is demonstrated. As you said, having an empathy for the employees and all the stuff that you're saying. So when you basically kind of designing these things, right? So you have to design the specific behaviors, not everything kind of not tied to the real business moments. So you basically kind of have to measure how do we handle failures, and how do we kind of give feedbacks, and how do we make decisions even when data is incomplete. So all those kind of comes under the part of an empathy only. Because if you are not learning how to basically kind of handle a failure, or you are not as a manager kind of teaching them how they should handle the failure, right? Eventually it leads to the burnout and the attrition part. And the same way, if you are not learning how to give a feedback and how to receive a feedback, I think in that aspects also definitely it is going to kind of impact the organization in kind of in my terms. So
So I
the
think you, I've been an engineer and then shifted my bases into the HR space. So in what I could understand from the discussion is like you have a process, you have an input, you have an output. Output, we know what is desired. So in order to get those desired, we need to put the right input across, and we, like you said, we also have a feedback loop across, so that there is a course correction, the feedback mechanisms and everything you brought in, rightly said.
Yeah, I would also put in this way. So culture is something is the operating system, which is the heart of your organization, and employee experience is basically kind of an interface which is still needed, and excellence is basically the output which you are basically kind of expecting. Because you can redesign the interface all day along, bring new intranets and the new benefits and new kind of programs for the wellness part. But the operating system, right, which is basically underneath is kind of in still in a fear based or a comfort based or a lack of empathy, right? I don't think it is going to help. So they are just keep going to polish the surface and something which basically never built, and they produce excellence in the first place. But the main problem is many people confuse empathy with being right. For an example, an employee, right? Let's say they are not following a policy, you cannot be empathy on them, right? So from but how you need to see is whether the checkpoint is from starting from us, whether it has been communicated properly to him. Is there any communication gaps we are seeing in that communication thing? And then basically kind of you need to talk, is it a kind of a repeated thing happening, or is it a once in a while happening? So the empathy, right, basically comes in that way. And my boss always kind of beats me on this part, and I use that empathy part, and I'm still getting beaten, but I still love to get beaten because that gives me a lot of learning curve. He's a kind of 60-year man, so he has a lot of experience, and he saw a lot of kinds of people. And that experience basically when he puts into me, and I'm basically kind of humbled to learn that empathy is a very critical part still needed. For an example, let's say I'm basically designing a form, right? So I need to basically communicate about a benefit. I need to do some survey. I cannot put information through the lens of HR. Hey, I'm announcing a benefit. So if you're interested, basically do it. No, I cannot put that. You need to see what are the critical things which employee would look up to kind of sign up for the benefits, and how it is going to really help them to transform themselves from one stage to another stage. So those are the informations you have to basically put it in the kind of communication. And communication is a very critical part, I would say, in the empathy perspective. And many companies, I don't think they don't do kind of do this communication part very well. For an example, we even recently conducted this why workshop. The why workshop basically talks whenever you are doing something, whenever you are designing something, whenever you are bringing some new process, right? You first have to ask yourself why you really need it. I don't think many companies don't do that. Many companies think they have money, let's just throw the money. As I said, they're just trying to kind of polish the surface part alone. They don't see how it is going to impact the employees in a big time, or how it is going to bring a sustainable moment for the employees, how it is going to add up the value for the leaders to uphold or retain the talents. They don't see through that lens. And but we are talking about why now. But I think Toyota basically brought this why philosophy long back. Whenever they see when things are going wrong, they go through this five whys, right? So how we can keep asking the why factors and see how to basically keep fixing things. So the empathy part is still a core part. Even whatever it comes, whatever the system design, whatever we are doing, everything has to be designed from the empathy perspective. How, as an industry, we feel customer empathy is more important. Like employee empathy is also kind of plays its vital.
I think you rightly touched upon the point, like this quality maps and empathy maps across in the system, and how do we place it, and what I'll put it like every coin has both the heads and the tails, and how do we place ourselves and get the things done. That's very wonderful way to put at it. And I think you brought in the 5S principle, and then you
No,
also
no,
brought in.
it 5 years principle is that it is five whys.
I
So
was coming to
both.
that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, no, that's perfectly fine, because when leaders like Vimal come on board, it's always it integrates us to go to the next level of transformation when understanding a lot of things which we have learned across. So we looked at the concept of 5S, then we also looked at Kaizen. How do we look at a delta change? See, it's not, we don't want a profound change, but we you rightly said about the compounding effect of changeover. 0.01 a day will shift the bases across over a period of time.
Definitely, definitely. They should
And
not try to do everything on a whole day. They have to do with a gradual change and definitely lead you to the success.
every day is a day to impact, and every day is a present. So live those present moments. That's what I think Vimal wants to put it across, because we have seen so much of impact and things. So from the organizational restructuring point of view, we would have seen the Lehman Brothers impact, and the 9/11, the COVID, and everything, and a lot of economical meltdown and everything. So when you look at the restructuring part or detailing, how do you look the employees can have a trust, because there's always an uncertainty over there.
Uh, it depends because we always see from the perspective of IT engineering side, but there are still a lot of industries kind of still survive this 9/11 things and all the things. But of course, unfortunately, the IT industry is kind of the deciding factor and the purchasing power part. So they plays a very critical role, which we cannot basically refuse it. So how basically kind of employee can trust? I think basically kind of it's a I would say it's a very kind of sensitive question. It's a beautiful question. It's a very tough part also because the control versus trust, right? I always feel the trust they have to keep it themselves only because they cannot see that they cannot put the trust over the company. They have to basically kind of see whether they have a control towards whatever they are basically kind of learning and whether they are kind of competent enough to manage whatever the circumstances coming through. And when you told about this 9/11 incident, right? So I think my boss was basically kind of he shared an incident that he was running a company in US with almost around 200 engineers, and that basically kind of shattered him his business model, whatever he had in US. But he didn't stop by. He had the trust in himself, and he basically felt maybe instead of doing that, maybe we can start the business here, and basically that helps to kind of provide more employments basically in the India part. So the trust part, they have to keep it with themselves. They have to basically see whether they have a control also towards it. And whatever the process which they basically kind of going through, they have to make sure there is no friction is happening for them. That is the critical part, I would say.
From that perspective, the next okay, so in your journey across, in your personal leadership journey across, because you've been with the organization for a longer tenure, what lessons should the leadership look at while developing the people and the next generation across? What would be your say? I think you talked about desperation. I think I'll put it in a positive way. There has been no desperation. There has been aspirations for people to look at things. So, what would you give it as a note for the future generations to grow at this kind of an uncertain world? What should they look at?
They have to stay curious, I would say. And of course, they have to read a lot. There is no doubt. So they have to kind of keep thinking themselves as a kind of half filled cup. They cannot think themselves as any time they are basically kind of filled cups. But of course, we do have a huge challenge because with the Gen Zs, right? I think I can already see, right, the shift is happening in a bigger time. Even in the pay scale, also it's happening. So we always talk constantly the pay scale, which whatever is Gen Z is making over the 90s, right? That brings a lot of contradiction. Many times, senior people will come and ask, when I was a kind of a person, this is what I made, but these days Gen Zs are making this much. Then I would say those are all part and parcel of eras. We cannot avoid it. So you cannot basically kind of mulch over. They are basically making big, you are making less. But what you need to see is how much value is you added and how much memories it stays in your part that you contributed decent things in your life. Because the whole software engineering philosophy is about making the betterment of the society. Whatever the software we are making, right, that basically helps to kind of make the betterment of the society only. And I would tell that basically kind of people. Sorry, I got a little bit lost. Am I audible?
Yes, Vimal, you are good
Okay.
to go.
Yeah. So people basically kind of see that whether they are competent enough in all the times. And for that, they have to read a lot, definitely, because the upcoming generations, right, they are basically going to challenge us a lot. They are going to stay very smarter than us, that is for sure. And to kind of compete with such kind of an environment, right, you need a lot of brain power and you need to definitely exercise a lot for sure. You cannot skip that part, and you need to have a very good sleeping pattern for sure. And grasping skills is a very critical part, I would say. So people have to improve their decision making skills and judgment skills. Those skills, I believe, nobody can basically replace it as much as quickly. Even if you rely on AI, we don't allow the AI to make critical decisions. For an example, even though Tally has maybe AI feature, but still the authorization, right, they still need a human to authorize it. The same way, even though the Cloud AI is developing a lot of programming structures, but somebody has to approve it to embed that code into the system, right? So I think still those are all there. As long as they do have these three core skills, I would say they are going to have a great career in their times. And of course, networking. That is the lesson which I also learned in my meantime. And you are a great example for me in the networking part, right? I was really humbled to kind of know that how you are able to manage such a big network and still staying into, like for an example, you finished already kind of one webinar and then you're coming out with the same into, but you are in the opposite seat now, right? So there is a lot to learn, and that curiosity I think people should have. People cannot skip that. I learned a lot. I learned everything. I know everything. No, I don't think so. So they have, as long as they live, as long as they want to basically kind of get somewhere a job or get into work, they have to learn for sure wherever they are going. But LinkedIn also kind of tell that very clearly. 2050, we are going to see a huge crisis on the leadership part. So everybody want to be this worker bee, right? Everybody is want to get into this task mode. I don't know. When I read this, I read this blog, I think 2014 or sometime before, I believe. That was stuck in my mind very clearly that we are going to face a huge leadership crisis. I don't know why they predicted, whether they predicted the AI that time itself. I'm not sure. But the leadership part is the critical, essential skill, which I believe everybody basically kind of have to onboard. I would say leadership is kind of bigger thing. They may not able to do it right away, but the stepping stones are the judgment skills, the decision making skills, and thinking through the system designing level, I would say. So these are the things, even at whatever the role you are playing, solving the problems also, right? You need to be a problem solver. You cannot go with the three options. You need to tell me which option works better, right? All the time. You cannot kick the problem to my place. Then you are not being hired for that. You need to tell me which option works better, and you need to have the confidence to tell that, yeah, this option will work better. We can go for this for sure. I
I
believe I
think
answered your question, right?
there is always no question or no answers. It's always about conversations, and because Vimal had this outlook towards looking at problem statement and looking at that solution that worked for Vimal and his journey, and what worked for Indwin across might not work for somebody else, because everyone
True,
has to
true.
take their own journey. What we do over here is the conversation, a heart to heart open conversation, so that people can look at similarities, what they feel across. And before we deep dive into the rapid fire, I'll take a point, like I think you also rightly put about the concept of in kind of a reverse engineering, in the sense we are looking at mentoring the next generation, and we are also going to get reverse mentored from the younger generation across for the
True.
technology perspectives, because we come from a generation who had used your Nokia 110. I think before that we used a pager. We come from a generation who have seen the ups and downs in the telecommunication industry. A pager, a phone, then a Walkman, or a cassette player, Walkman, VCR, your DVD,
These
CD
are
player,
everything.
everything. And I think the younger generation also needs to understand we need to stay relevant and resilient across. Before we go for deep diving into what all things we discussed, we'll go for a quick round of rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay, so one HR trend that deserves more attention.
Um, I think still, I would say like employee experience, as you put, right. So they need to look through the kind of employee excellence part. So that trend, I think, still it's not started. When I basically kind of see, right, we all still talking about employee engagement and then employee experience and employee satisfaction. So this HR trend, right, it is the right way to start on employee excellence. I think nobody is starting it. I think they have to start from that.
One book every HR profession should read.
Who Moved My Cheese? That is my favorite book. I would say it's very easy to start. Also, I would recommend many of my people because that is the need of the hour. Also, so that talks a lot, which whatever we are talking now.
Okay, okay, okay. One habit that transformed your leadership.
Being open to the feedback. Of course,
Okay,
you need to basically argue for sure, but on a rightful tone, you need to ask, and you need to ask why also.
absolutely. Hybrid or office?
Office, I love office.
Okay, you want to hire for skill or hire for attitude?
I want to hire for attitude because if anybody has an attitude, I can basically teach them skills, and I have the right amount of ecosystem to do that.
Okay, one quote which you live by.
Success doesn't come easily. At the same time, you cannot put success doesn't come by hard work. Also, you need to be smart. Of course, you need to learn how to use the situation and time.
From this answer, I want to say, are you a Rajni fan?
No, I am a kind of Vijay fan. I thought to
Okay,
say.
okay, okay, okay.
Right.
No, why? Because the dialogue comes in "Adhigama patta asa padravanu." The
Right.
re-release of the Padayappa movie brings in that
True, true,
nostalgia
true.
across. But I think Vijay also does put in like his transformation journey from
Yes,
films to the politics. It's
politics.
not an easy journey, but
It's
let's
not
look
easy.
at the next level of KRA and KPIs across.
True.
That's another episode for a discussion. So, but okay, so next is how do you want to come? One mistake which HR leaders repeat.
Uh, they say yes when sometimes management basically telling something. They have to learn to say no at the times.
Okay, AI or emotional intelligence, which will matter more in 2030?
I would say emotional intelligence. We started discussing the topic 3 years before itself. It matters a lot, of course, in the organization context.
Okay, complete the sentence. Employee excellence begins when?
When everybody realizes their own role.
Okay, okay. There's no right or wrong, so it's always good to have conversations. So perfectly fine. And you have before I wrap up the discussions which we have with pointers across what all things we did. You have anything for our listeners who would who are listening to us, or when this episode is over, we'll be putting it across into the digital mode in YouTube. So, do you have anything which you want to say to the next generation?
I would say don't fear, and whatever we are going through is always kind of temporary only. And try to learn the politics. That is for sure. The politics means it has both good politics and bad politics, because you need to learn who is who, and you need to learn how to get things done through who. And don't skip the communication part. That is a very critical element which will make you survive as a person. That will make you remember who you are. And many people, I'm seeing that in the engineering side on the introvert part. So very few. So they have to basically kind of keep working on the communication part, because they all have beautiful ideas. Once they start communicating, right, I think the things will fall in their place. And keep reading. That is a critical thing again, because we all were in a time during a school times we pushed to read and mug up. So unfortunately now, if we kind of get a book, we will read it. But now everything is digital. I think the reading phase, right, and it's kind of getting reduced. People want to kind of listen more, because reading only will give you a lot of imagination. The imagination power. If you want to improvise, please read it.
So, for listeners, there are a lot of takes from Mr. Vimal. I would like to sum up a few of the discussions which we had. So, Vimal, what all discussions we had over here are our own personal opinions. Please do not put us across on any
True.
platform where it is a uh, perspectives or something. These are discussions which are looking at transforming the next generation of HRs or next generation of leaders. So from our discussion, I took few pointers, like we need to be optimizing our journey. For optimizing, I think we need to do a lot of reading and need to have a lot of thinking across and capabilities of imaginations, and that imagination has to be curbed into design thinking, so that we ideate, we prototype, and then we look at an outcome. And I think you also brought in a lot of P's and lot of V's. So P's were like pulse, process, procedures, policies. Then the C's were like capabilities, competence, clarity, communication, being curious. And then you also brought in the concept of human in loop. And then you also brought in the value system which we need to stand for, and the leaders which need to have that governance part. And you also talked about how do we stretch ourselves. We need to be elastic, and we also need to be plastic. We need to know where all we can stretch and where all we are not supposed to stretch, and we say a no across. And
True.
I think you also brought in the perspective of every individual to have to be a responsible person, and from that responsibility you also brought in the social perspective, so collaborations and everything. So you brought in social responsibility, and from social responsibility you also brought in the country part into it, and the corporations across. So you also brought in about corporate social responsibility for the place where we work and for the community we work. And you also brought in the perspective of we as a generation looked at earlier prompt engineering, but I think you also brought in the concept of having a context and a context engineering, the relevance of the knowledge which we learn and everything. And I you took me back to my earlier career graph, where because I worked with Dr. AVM, and he used to say, don't if you want to take decisions, and there's nothing as right or wrong decisions. Those are
True.
decisions, you make it right. And I think he learned it. I think he used to reference it to Ratan Tata across, saying decisions are made, now you need to make it right across. And I think you also brought in the perspective of collaborations and curious. And I could put a thing over there, like uh, if you want to look at more salaries or more um, take homes or anything, solve bigger problems.
True.
If you solve one problem, you are paid X, and if you solve multiple problems, you get an X square. So start being problem solvers for somebody else, and be coding and everything, you can get people across. But we want people with empathy, clarity and staying relevance. So that's Indwin for you for the today's episode 16, and we do have Vimal. Thank you, Vimal, for your wonderful time and discussion across. This is both Vimal and Indwin signing off for the day, and wishing you all a great success. And do follow Vimal across. And he just said he just gave a takeaway for his business, saying if you are in any entity or somebody who is struggling with a digital transformation, do get in touch with Mr. Vimal on LinkedIn and take the transformation journey for your organizations. Thank you, Vimal, for your time, and thanks to Sapient HR and Leadership Lens. Thank you for being part of the journey.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you so much for this opportunity for you and Arun. And I would like to thank all the people who helped me to kind of reach this place. And I believe to the listeners also. So whatever we said, as Edwin told, right, it is our perspective. So please don't take it personal. But take good things as a personal, definitely, which will help you, whichever is helping you to grow. So please take it personal. And I wish you all the very best for everyone. Thank you.